Emma. So good morning, everyone. My name is Hina Shah. I'm a senior analyst at the Kansas Health Institute, and you are the Quality of Care and Protective Services Working Group that was convened by the Senior Care Task Force. I know you've met a few times, and this is about your fourth meeting now, and so I'm excited to get us started for today. So Emma has pulled up the agenda for now, so remember we always have about 90-minute meetings. We do have quite a bit to go through, but this morning, keep in mind that we're going to be discussing your second topic. So in January, you discuss your first topic, and in February, we'll be focusing on the second one of safeguards to prevent abuse, neglect, and exploitation of seniors in the state of Kansas. And so the goal of this meeting is to hear some presentations and then lead the working group into developing recommendations during your next meeting, February 22nd. So we'll follow that same format as January. We do have 3 presentations today. So one will be from your contact expert, Chrissy Khatib from DCF. Also Task Force member Camille Russell, your Kansas Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And then also we have a supplemental expert, Linda Davies, who is from the Kansas State Board of Nursing. So we will have those 3 presentations for today. Let's also really keep in mind our meeting commitments for the day. Come ready to discuss and compromise, keep remarks succinct and on topic. Don't hesitate to ask clarifying questions, and then make sure you start and end on time. Since Emma is sharing, I will be able to monitor my chat box as you need, so feel free to chat any questions or concerns as they arise. And so let's kind of start like we typically do, where I'm going to kick us off this morning and ask each member to, 1, introduce themselves, and then 2, really think about what is one thing you want the group to keep top of mind when you are starting discussion on this topic and listening to these presentations. So let's keep it brief, maybe like 1 or 2 sentences, but what do you really want everyone to keep top of mind? And I am going to go ahead and call on a few people. Emma, you can stop sharing the agenda and we can just have everyone see everyone and be able to talk about your second topic. So Bill, I'm going to ask you to kick off this morning, if you don't mind.
Morning, everybody. Bill Persinger here, Chief Executive at Vallejo Behavioral Health Care, one of the licensed community mental health centers in the state of Kansas. I sure want to thank you for the deep time investment, the talent that you bring. I just want to really keep focused on, the needs of our families, needs of residents, and also as we discuss recommendations, whether policies, programs, statutes, any of that material, that we keep in mind scalability. We're a state of 105 counties, all of different sizes, needs, and capacities, and if we can keep scalability in mind, so what might work in Topeka could also work in Great Bend. Thank you. I always want to say thank you for staff support too. It is tremendous.
Thank you, Bill. Let's see. Is Liana on? I see Liana. Yep, there you are.
Hi, I'm Leanna Chaffee. I work at Brewster in Topeka, and I'm representing adult care homes on the task force. And I think, as you've heard me say many times, the one thing I always want people to keep in mind is the older adults and the folks that we're talking about on this task force are individuals, and they have opinions and lives, and we should never let that get lost in any of the topics that we talk about, even abuse, neglect, and exploitation. They also need to be involved in that process. If it's happening, they need to be protected, they need to be listened to, and we just can't forget, because of their age, they're just like you and I, and so I just want to make sure we keep that in mind as we talk about everything.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Rachel.
Good morning, everyone. Elder lawyer down in Wichita, Kansas, and the topic for this meeting, I want to see that vulnerable people and our seniors are protected vis-a-vis the caregivers that they're using.
Thank you. Camille?
Hello, Camille, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman, and our goal today, as always, is that we really focus on the individual and that they are heard, respected, and listened to, even in this process, like Lee said, and that they have choice and self-determination no matter where their address. So that's kind of what I want to focus on.
Thank you. Ernest?
Yes, good morning. Ernest Cutley, Advocacy Director, AARP Kansas. I was just thinking that that this is the people first thing that we should realize, as I heard someone say that these are individuals, no matter whether they're in a facility, in the community, wherever, that we need to bring everyone possible together to look at protecting them, including themselves. So the other thing I would say was thank you for this this opportunity to be part of this and for the task force to come together. And thinking as I thought about it over the weekend, wondering ways to continue once the task force is done, all these great meetings. Thank you.
Thank you. And is Deborah on? I don't think I see her. All right. How about Carter?
Hey there, Carter Olson, administrator from Glasgow, Kansas, North Central Kansas. I really agreed with Bill and Camille and what their sentiments were, but kind of giving something different than I guess is, you know, I think being able to offer accurate and up-to-date records of professionals offering care at our homes and being able to track who specifically has a track record of what at the home it is very essential for our elders and our families. And then trying to find ways to offer more assistance from surveyors with visits now spanning, 15 to 18 months at times. It can even impact some homes negatively. Myself, I'm at a home that's, a 2-star on the health star rating because of a bad survey before I got there. And, we still haven't had that 3rd survey to drop it off. So, just trying to look at ways to support homes to offer more accurate and up-to-date information.
Thank you. And I don't think I see Roger on. Tracy?
Hannah, I think Roger's ill today. I got a text from him earlier. Sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. Tracy, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Davies, nurse practitioner, and I'm affiliated with Washburn University School of Nursing as the program director for the Psych Mental Health Certificate Program, and also nurse practitioner at Compass Behavioral Health in Dodge City. And given my background in long-term care, I would just say that I hope that what we keep top of mind is the environment of care and how it contributes to the topic we're discussing today. If we take care of the caregivers and we have an environment that has resources and systems in place, we can really impact these numbers.
Thank you. Next, I have Chrissy.
Hey, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thinking about this topic, I would like to encourage all of us to think about this from the lens of prevention. I do believe that a lot of these things we can prevent. I truly believe so. When I think about this population, our older adults, the greatest population I think in the world, there's a tremendous amount of shame and embarrassment that occurs when individuals are abused, neglected, exploited. They're reluctant to come forward, but yet we see where younger adults experience scams and they're willing to share. But our older adults are incredibly embarrassed about coming forward. So how might we get some prevention out there? How might we how do we allow our older adults to be able to come forward, share what happened so we can do whatever we can to support them?
Thank you. Jan? Jan, you're still muted.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, Dan Kimbrell, Morris County, Silverhead legislator, representing seniors who may be in that last resort that you don't want, trying to improve their quality of life and doing what we can to assure there is a quality of life in their final years. So I bring that as a general concern and as a personal concern, as we have family in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't see Miss Merrill on. And our supplemental expert, Miss Linda Davies, is still joining, so I don't see her on. So why don't we kick off with our presentations. We can start off with Chrissy. And Chrissy, do you want to go ahead and share your screen, or do you want us to bring it up for you?
Would you be willing to bring it up for me? I'm not.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. And I just realized I didn't introduce myself. That wasn't brilliant. Chrissy Katib. I am an administrator at Adult Protective Services and been with DCF SRS for over 26 years. So today, I promise I won't take too much time because many of you heard me speak before about Adult Protective Services, but we'll go on to the next slide. So the next slide, I was given a couple questions to ask for this committee. So we're just going to talk today about just what happens during a DCF investigation, where the abuse is occurring, how these cases are assigned, talk a little bit about self-neglect, and just lastly about, it gets a little confusing, so hopefully I can share with you or explain to you how cases are assigned and which different agencies do different investigations. So next slide. So I think it's always important to start with what is the role of Adult Protective Services. So KSA 39-1430 talks about any individual that's 18 years of age or older that it's been alleged to, I'm sorry about that, to not be able to protect themselves through action or inaction. Those cases, those would be reviewed and a decision would be made about assigning those cases. Our role is to provide advocacy, and that's one thing I want to stress. When our protection specialists go out into the home, we listen to our involved adults and listen about what are their wishes. You know, some of our adults want to stay in their home as long as they possibly can. So it's our job to support them and make sure that they have the resources and supports that they need. That goes on to we refer for services, and we do our very best to keep them in the least restrictive environment. There are times when we go out to homes and we find individuals lack capacity, and we could talk about that later, that we do have to pursue a guardianship and look at a more restrictive placement. But ultimately, our job is to support our older adults. Yes, we do assessments. Yes, we make case findings. But at the end of the day, it's about the advocacy. Next slide. So, okay, APS, what happens when you guys get a case? So the first thing that happens is when a case is called into the Protection Reporting Center, the first thing they do is our protection specialists, they would review those cases and and they make a decision if they meet the criteria for case assignment. If they do, those cases will be screened in and assigned either as a 24-hour, meaning that we need to make immediate contact due to the urgency or severity on the intake, or a 3-day or a 5-day. So once Protection Reporting Center assigns them, then they would go out to a worker across the state of Kansas. Next, our protection specialist would review that case and go out within that time frame. Often we get, now Chrissy, do you guys call ahead? I think you guys call ahead, and we don't. What we do is we will go out and make 2 unannounced face-to-face attempts. There are times when we're not successful, and after those 2 unannounced visits, then we may follow up with phone, by letter, sometimes by text messages to make that face-to-face contact. We would then meet with the involved adult and review the concerns on the allegation. We go over all of the information with them. Now, one thing to think about, I always talk about the number of people that kind of touch our cases. So when we first get that intake, there are occasions where it appears a crime has occurred. And so we would immediately notify law enforcement about that, and that would go to the law enforcement agency within that jurisdiction. We also contact the Attorney General's office, the A&E unit. And also, if it's Medicaid related, we would forward that case on to the Medicaid fraud unit. Okay, so we met with our involved adult. We've talked to them, got their feedback about what's going on with the intake. We then move on to interviewing the alleged perpetrator. We try to get as much information as we can about that concern before we meet with the alleged perpetrator. So if it's a financial crime, we may have gotten bank records, we may have talked to the banking institution, but we try to get as much facts and information put together before we meet with the alleged perpetrator. That also includes requesting documentation. So the statute allows us to request for things like medical records, bank records, education records, and that would help us too. And then lastly, we would meet with our alleged perpetrator and review the case with them. They are never told who calls in the concern. That's often a question, and that name is confidential. So reporter information is confidential. Also part of our assessment is then we would refer the involved adult to any services in the community that they choose to participate in. And then when it gets to case finding, Adult Protective Services requires clear and convincing evidence to make a case finding of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. And that's a little bit different than the child side. So that's greater than a preponderance of evidence. Part of that is feedback that we've received from multiple professionals in the community, because oftentimes, not often, but there are occasions where it would affect employment. So we want to make sure that we're making strong case findings. We also review substantiated findings with our attorneys. So once, if we do substantiate a person for abuse, neglect, or exploitation, the perpetrator, their name would be placed on the registry after the appeal period. And as I said before, there are times in our assessments where we do have to pursue guardianship. I'd have to go back and give you an exact number. I would say it's probably less than 5 to 7% maybe. And again, that's for individuals that lack capacity. And I always try to stress to people, DCF, our protection specialists, don't determine capacity. Per state statute, those would be like medical professionals, individuals from a community mental health center, individuals from a DD facility or disability, developmental disability facility. Okay, next slide. Okay, so where is the abuse occurring? This slide just breaks it down by regions through the state of Kansas. So as you can tell, there's 6 regions, but we just became 6 regions within the last maybe year and a half. So we're still working on our data. So right now we still have it by the 4 DCF regions in the past. But what you can tell is East Region to Wichita, cases are assigned there's about the same number of cases coming into each region, around 4,000. What you will see is like Kansas City is growing. And what we are finding is with our older adults that they are moving, we're seeing quite a few move from a rural setting to an urban setting. Lots of reasons why. Some of it's due to they want to be close to family members. Some want to be close to different sorts of healthcare institutions. You know, the other is our older adults are incredibly vibrant. They're living longer. They want to be close to an airport so they can travel. At least pre-COVID, they were traveling. So you'll see intakes received, and then about 58% of the intakes that we received are assigned for further investigation. And then we go on to substantiation rates, and that's by region, and you'll see some differences there. You know, that's an area I would always tell you with Adult Protective Services, we probably need to strengthen our inter-rater reliability and make sure that we're being consistent across all of our regions. But ultimately, you'll see that substantiation for self-neglect, that's our greatest number. I think it's in the next slide, but we'll talk about, I think 46% of the cases that come in have an allegation type of self-neglect. One thing to think about too, 36% of the substantiated for self-neglect are individuals 70 years of age or older. And I've got a slide to talk a little bit about age, because I think this could be helpful for this group when we think about possible maybe promotion materials or education. Okay, next slide. All right, so how are these cases for the allegation type? One thing, again, I do want to stress is when cases come into Department for Children and Families, APS, they tend to have multiple allegation types. And I think you'll see 46% of our intakes come in with an allegation type along with include self-neglect. Often we'll see our financial crimes, like a financial exploitation, they'll have a self-neglect attached to that. Sometimes there's 2, 3, maybe even 4 allegation types, so our workers are making findings on all of those. Again, this data was pulled before our statutes were updated. Today, we have the allegation type of financial exploitation, where previously we were the only state in the United States that broke out financial crimes into fiduciary abuse and exploitation. So that's been incredibly helpful in making sure our cases are assigned correctly. So again, last year we had 17,184 cases came in. 46% of those, or about 58% of those, were assigned. And consistently, when I looked at trend data, about anywhere between 20 and 22% of all of the cases coming into the DCF office are a financial crime. So I did cite, if you can see on the bottom of the slide, and I think this will be shared with you, all of this information is available in our website. So let's say you're curious about Sedgwick County. You could go into our website and break this down by county if you're interested. Okay, next slide. I hope I'm not going too fast, but I didn't want to take up too much time. Allegations by age group. I kind of slipped this slide in for all of you to review because I think it could be insightful. What we did is we again, this is data on our website, but we look at all the different allegation types, and then we look at age in which those are assigned. And I think it's interesting what you'll see, whether it be abuse, exploitation, fiduciary abuse, or neglect. The majority of, when you look at over the years, the majority are coming in between ages 70 and 79. So for me, when I look at that, I think about, is there more education? Is there prevention? What might we do to do a better job of talking about things like durable power of attorneys, talking about do you have a list of all of your financial records and who has access to that and things like that. How do we provide education so our older adults can make the best decisions possible? Real quickly, case decisions have to be made by our protection specialist within 30 days, but with the new statutes, we were given an additional 45. We were given an additional 15 days, so it's 45 days to make a case finding. And again, tremendously thankful because when we get these bank records, we may get, I don't know, we may get a year's worth of bank records. And I always tell people, I kind of giggle, I'm like, I can barely balance my own checking account. So if somebody gives me a year's worth of bank record, it's going to take me a little bit of time to go through those. So greatly appreciated. All right. And then the next slide is about who completes the assessment. Okay, this is where I would say, even for me, sometimes it gets a little confusing. So when cases come into our office, there's often multiple agencies touching our involved adults. So I always try to, kind of generally explain to individuals, if the individual resides in the community, there's a pretty good chance that Adult Protective Services would complete that assessment. So for example, if the individual is living in a group home, developmental disability group home, we would complete those assessments. If the individual is in a nursing facility, now KDADs would complete those investigations unless the alleged perpetrator is not a staff member. So let's say we have an older adult that lives in a nursing facility and maybe they have a granddaughter that was helping out with their finances, but now we're seeing lots of money come up missing. The granddaughter is obviously not a staff member of the agents of the nursing facility, so Adult Protective Services would complete that investigation. But what we can say is when we make findings, for example, in anybody like on a Medicaid waiver, we always notify KDADs of those investigations. So every month when we substantiate anybody for abuse, neglect, financial exploitation, self-neglect, KDADs would know, they would get a list of those individuals so they can do any sort of remedial process to help support that involved adult. Next slide. So KDHE, there are times when we get concerns of an individual that, for example, that like in a birthing center or in a home health agency, if they're in a home involved with a home health agency and the individual again resides in the community, DCF would complete that assessment, but we would then forward a copy of our finding to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. But again, if they're in a hospital, critical access hospital, those cases would be assigned to KDHE. And then KDAS, Kansas Department for Aging and Disability. So if the individual is in a long-term care facility, adult care home, and the staff are the alleged perpetrator, those cases would be assigned to KDAS. And so I've got, that's not a complete list, but I could always send you a complete list or cite statute for you. All right. And then the last slide is just Jessica and I, our contact information, and we would always be available to answer any additional questions if you have any. So I tried to make this quick, so thank you, and I hope I didn't go too fast.
Thank you, Chrissy. Any questions from the group?
Ina, I would like to ask a couple of questions. Be sure to say thank you to Chrissy and Jessica for the work that you guys do. On the data on page 5, and I know you're moving from 4 regions to 6. Are those data available, or could someone run a calculation per 1,000 or per 10,000 population? Sometimes, you know, comparing a raw number of 4,600 to 4,000, you know, would give us a better idea of incidence. And I know you guys are overworked as it is, but if somebody could run those numbers, it'd be interesting at some point in the future, not today, but just so we get an idea of the prevalence, you know. But this sure tells a story about your workload, and I sure appreciate that. And then I would just ask you to be thinking going forward into this meeting or you know, other meetings, what resources you need in your office in particular, Chrissy, and you know, what would be helpful? Regulation, statute, funding, increased collaboration somewhere, you know, increased input, you know, and of course a lot of that leads to, you know, staffing and funding questions and concerns. But I would just ask you to be thinking about, you know, relative to this particular topic, you know, what it is you guys need there. And that's maybe more rhetorical than anything at this point.
Well, I can definitely share with you some ideas about needs within adult protective services.
I say if we have time, go ahead. I'm interested in, you know, how we can, you know, increase protection and responsivity and that kind of thing.
And I always try to look at it through the lens. It doesn't necessarily have to be adult protective services providing the services, but what we do find needs for our adults living in the community, older adults, would be, I always think about on the child side, they have these amazing services like family preservation and in-home family therapy, things like that that are tremendously helpful. Our older adults, especially those with chronic health conditions that are experiencing mobility issues, we do have some in-home services like home health, but I always think we could use more to help really care coordinate, to provide case management for them, to support them so that they can live in the community. We know sometimes our older adults have to go to a more restrictive environment, but if we look at it just through the lens, well, first of all, we should always look at it through the lens of what's in the best interest of our involved adults and what do they choose, because they are adults and they have the right to determine. But if they want to live in the home, what sort of in-home supports can we provide them? What sort of, whether it be case management, that sort of services would be tremendously helpful. We also talked a little bit about, I know Bill, you and I have talked about it briefly about mental health services. Our older adults often can't get to a community mental health center. And so I go back to in-home supports are critical.
Well,
And then
thank you.
Oh, and the last one I would say is education. We really need to do, I think, as a state, a better job of educating our older adults on financial crimes. We need to have conversations about who are the people that they trust to manage their finances. Do they have a list of all of like our older adults are tremendous about having assets and diversifying funds. And so do they have a complete list of all of their different assets and do they have a family member, somebody that they trust that's going in to monitor that? It's one thing to have it, but is somebody checking it monthly or quarterly to make sure there's no suspicious activity? And that's another conversation. Because what I find over and over again is our older adults are embarrassed to come forward. They're ashamed. They think they should know better. But scams can happen to anybody. I kind of giggle and my son will not be thrilled with me, but he got a scam because he bought some iPods off the line and lost $50. Felt he could come forward, but our older adults tend not to.
I had one other question, if time would permit. Hina, I hate to, it's kind of on a roll here because Chrissy's presentation raised so many good points. Are there, regarding abuse, neglect, fiduciary, financial, all those kind of reporting areas that you graphed in the pie chart, are there some common life events that trigger those kind of complaints or that put older Americans at risk? I mean, obviously there's, a spouse dies and they handled all the financial records, somebody moves, somebody gets, but are there life events that, we could help educate the public about? Hey, if your family's about to experience or just experienced this, here's a few things to watch for, and maybe a tool for our ombudsman, our public education folks to use.
I can think, and I will always say too, sometimes adult protective services gets the more serious the severity of the case. I mean, the more serious cases. So what we often see is sometimes we'll see family members that move back in home with mom or dad. Maybe it's a son or daughter, and so they've had some life events, financial experiences, and mom might need a little additional support. And I truly believe, and this might be the social worker in me, that people really go in genuinely wanting to help, wanting to be supportive of their loved one. But what we find is the older adult, as they continue to age, as they experience chronic health conditions, as their health declines, and to me that's the key point, is once that health significantly declines, their care becomes greater. And so that family member who started off with the best intentions is starting to get tired, overwhelmed, caregiver stressed, and then we end up with just situations that we wish we could have prevented. Now, the tricky part of this, and I thank you for allowing me bringing this up, Bill, would be then our older adults don't want to share. Maybe son or daughter took this money from their account or committed this abuse. One, they don't want to share because it's their loved one. They love their son or daughter tremendously. And secondly, if they do share, does that mean they're going to a nursing facility? And not that nursing facilities aren't bad or long-term care facilities are bad, but some really want to choose to stay in their home. So they might be reluctant to come forward to share that. So that's one, we see that quite a bit within our individuals living within the community.
Chrissy, Carter Olson here, administrator, and as one to speak on the nursing home point you're making, I even have this instant right now where, we've seen it a lot in rural areas and a lot of my peers see it. Doctors are the only ones who have the ability in our areas who are willing to step up and say, okay, this person is or is not able to financially care for themselves, but they don't do it unless a nursing home's going to push them to do it. So I think my question would be, are there other resources that I guess rural areas are not aware of to be able to help protect these older individuals who are staying at home far too long and then ending up in our care with neglect that is irreversible? Because I think that's where, Bill hinted at it hard. You guys want the mental health training, and that could really assist what you guys do. But are there any other resources right now besides doctors that can help declare somebody financially incapable?
So I think what you're talking about, Carter, is does somebody lack capacity? And there is a state statute around that. And I could be happy to send you those statute numbers, but it lists out who complete capacity evaluations, or it also says that the court can designate somebody to do that.
Do you feel like
Typically,
there's enough just on with your personal knowledge? Are there enough resources to be able to correctly offer it to every location in Kansas?
so are there enough professionals? Yes, but this is where it gets a little bit tricky. I would tell you it would be to go out to a home and ask an older adult, hey, would you be willing to get in the car with us or go with your family member for a capacity evaluation? This won't shock you. Sometimes we get is, heck no, I'm not going. You know, they have no desire.
Of course.
So that's where those in-home supports, you know, I was talking about, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a co-responder through a community health center that specialized in geriatric care to go out and help us and make those determinations.
Sure.
So that would
I
be
just ask
helpful.
more from the rural standpoint because many of these people have families who are out of state, et cetera. And then,
Yeah.
you know, one bad cousin or one bad stepkid moves in and there's nothing they can really do. So just wondering more from that sense too.
That's a great question, Carter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy.
Chrissy, I've got a couple of questions. First of all, can you walk us through how the registry works and who can access the registry? And second, do you have financial support within your different regions? So, you know, whether it's a CPA or someone that's skilled in helping forensically look at these records.
Thank you. And thank you so much again for asking that question. So we do have one individual that works that's specifically designated across the state to do our financial records. And we have, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of our system, but basically we can put in all of the bank records and it puts them all in a spreadsheet. So I apologize that my name just dropped. But do we have enough? You know, that's a tough one because the financial crimes tend to be getting more and more serious. I remember a case out of Johnson County where our alleged perpetrator opened up 23 credit cards. So it was a lot of work. We did get some COVID and American Rescue Plan Act funding. And so I'm excited to say that we're going to designate some of those dollars to help secure forensic accounting services. But do we have enough? It's one of those tough questions. We would never have enough because those cases take such a tremendous amount of time to go through all of those banking records. Also incredibly helpful, and Rachel, you know, Sedgwick County and Johnson County have FAST teams, which are financial abuse specialist teams to help where our protection specialists go in, present financial cases, and we can staff those and get the support of the district attorney's office along with local law enforcement. Because I always tell people in the community, we have workers that go out with social worker hearts. They're either social workers or in the field of social services. They're not financial accountants. And so that takes a different skill set or different expertise. So that is the support that we could use. I hope I answered your question.
Chrissy, this is Camille, the State Long-Term Care Ombudsman. And I have a question for you. In looking at this in a person-centered way, we tend to see the very same look at a case with when we do have individuals who would like assistance. We seem to see the same look from APS at with that case with an individual who wants to participate and wants something looked at and wants their loved one to really be looked into and those records to be gone through. We see there's the same address as someone who is like, look, I've always given them my money and I want to continue to give them my money and leave me alone. And it's like, it seems like the system is deciding for that person about their money at some point. Like we have a little bit of ageism or a little bit of decision-making on their part because they get a certain age or live in a certain place. Can you address that?
And Camille, I'm not sure if I understood the question because I want to make sure I answer it to the best if I can. So like maybe adult protective services not being consistent in how we work with the adult or?
Well, that self-determination of that resident or that person who does want that addressed, is there a way to bring that to a higher level of address than that one that says, look, I've been giving them my money since they, I've always given them my money. Because the nursing home isn't getting paid, now I got a report and I want, now you're looking at it. And there's consequences to that. I'm not trying to make light of non-payment at all, but we sometimes have hard time getting things looked at in a depth with those individuals who do want it looked at.
And when you say looked at, I'm wondering if you're meaning like, do the cases even get assigned to Adult Protective Services? They are. Okay.
Yeah, they're assigned, but that forensic piece you're missing is really important. I agree with that question about that.
It is. And it gets really difficult too. I always say working with adults is a little bit, it's complex because they're adults. They're adults. They have the right to make decisions. And if an individual appears to have capacity, we have nothing stated that they lack capacity, then they make decisions for themselves. And this is where we sometimes will see individuals in nursing facilities that aren't making their payments, but maybe choose to give money to a loved one or a girlfriend or whatever it may be. They have the right to make that decision. It's when we believe that there may be undue duress or some sort of they're being pressured into exploitation that's occurring. So I would always say if you have a case where our workers aren't, maybe feel we could do a better job or we're not looking at all the facts, you're always welcome to reach out to us. Yeah.
Carter again here. Would that change if it was a hospital bill?
It wouldn't change. If an adult has capacity, they have the right to make decisions about their finances.
Chrissy, back to my first question and the registry. Social workers can gain access to like the child abuse registry clearance. You have to get a clearance before you can finalize an adoption. It has never made sense to me that there is not a similar requirement before you're putting an individual in charge and appointing them as a guardian or conservator. So can you kind of walk me through how the registry is used, who can access it, etc.?
Very good point. You are so the adult registry is very similar to the child registry. An individual would sign a release, and then that professional, the agency, whether it be a home health, nursing facility, whatever it may be, then they would go into our registry and check. You are correct. It's my understanding that somebody is appointed as a guardian or a conservator, we may not be checking the adult registry. So if that would be something that would be a strong recommendation, that anybody that does become a guardian or a conservator to have a registry check. We do maintain that registry, and I want to say, I don't want to give incorrect information, but maybe 60,000 checks last year. I don't know if I apologize. I can get you the exact number, but I do know it's being used often.
I don't know, as a lawyer that practices in the guardianship conservatorship area, I don't have access to the registry. My probate judge does not have access to the registry. So who is in the club? I mean, I take it's these licensed caregivers. When they're looking at a hire, they can go run a check and determine whether the LPN has been substantiated or not. But I feel like we're missing a piece of it on the legal side.
And I would agree with you. So I think you're exactly right. And having probate have access to that. And again, once that release is signed, then it's my understanding, if you get a release signed, anybody can check the registry. It tends to be, again, our long-term care facility, home health agencies, individuals within the IDD facilities, things like that. So, Rach, I hope I answered your question.
You did, and it might be as simple as, qualifying the appointment of an individual on signing a release with those records being released within the current framework. But that is not embedded in the guardianship conservatorship code presently.
Well, thank you. I think we've had some great discussion here and some recommendations that have kind of bubbled up for us to keep in mind. I'm going to ask everyone to hold any further questions for Chrissy and maybe hear from our other two experts first, and then we can come back and have discussion again. Is that okay with everyone? All right, Camille, do you want to go ahead and present, and do you want us to bring up the handout?
You can bring up the handout. That would be great. I'm going to demonstrate a little bit how differently we do operate from APS, because I'm not going to give you a whole lot of statistics or go through a whole lot of numbers. I'm going to tell you that we are truly and historically a person-centered model for advocacy for individuals. So we absolutely are guided by what the person, the resident wants. Do we investigate abuse, neglect, and exploitation? Yes. If we can get a call from anyone who calls us is confidential. We can't even tell the resident who has called us unless that caller gives us permission to do so. So when someone calls us and reports information, we take that information, we gather as we can, we let the caller tell us. If they're not the resident, we got to let them know, look, we are a resident-directed program. We follow the direction of that resident. We allow them choice and control over their lives. We're very person-centered. So if you'll give us all the information you can, we will give you all the resources we know where you can report this for a regulatory situation, be it something in a nursing home, and KDADS would be your person to look at. Be it exploitation would be an example that we would say you would want by a family member or someone in the community, and we would talk to them, Adult Protective Services, and where they could report to look at that for a substantiation for that level of evidence and that type of finding. For criminal referrals that, might need to be made. All the different places where other people have a role in addressing abuse, neglect, and exploitation. But for the Ombudsman program, we also can investigate abuse, neglect, and exploitation. We could be doing it at the same time as any of those other entities. We are careful, very careful, trying to stay out of their way, if that makes sense, and not be in a situation we would, cause a problem with their investigation. But at the same time, we have to tell that caller, they're not a resident, we will visit the resident and see what they can tell us. We look to see whether they have the ability to let us know what they would want. Sometimes we can determine that that person does not even have knowledge of it occurring, can't remember, and does not have the ability to tell us. So we have a couple options there. They have a resident, if they have a representative, we can use them as their proxy to guide us in what they would like us to do. If they do not, then we have methods in which we can actually investigate and turn over things to those other regulatory people. So it's not that we do not ever contribute, because when we can and they will allow us, that is what we want to do. We contribute to those investigations and work with them. I look forward to working on the multidisciplinary teams that the AG's office has put together. But again, even on those teams, we will require resident consent for what we can share and what we cannot share, or their representative if they're unable to give it. Again, there's some other processes. We do all of those things. We honor that. And why do we do that? Because you know what? Every single one of us has an option. If somebody does something in our home, to make a choice about the actions we take in that, whether we call it the APS or whether we call a law enforcement or whether we take any other action. Just because someone becomes a certain age or has a certain health condition or a certain disability and lives in an adult care facility, their rights do not change. In fact, they have some additional explicit rights about privacy and dignity and respect. And we have got to start figuring out that if we're going to look at this and work with individuals because their address happens to be an adult care home, that we've got to honor and respect the same rights and those additional ones that they would have if they still lived in their home. There is a prevalence of ageism in our country. It's how we locked people up, by the way, during this pandemic.
Camille,
families too.
Camille, no disagreements here from Carter, but I do have to question, what do you think is the biggest hindrance to consumers receiving person-centered care in our nursing home industry or in our industry of elders in general? What's the biggest hindrance?
Our workforce, our culture does, again, we're a little ageist, I'm just going to say that, but our culture, our support systems in that home, our staff, they must be also be worked with by the employers in a person-centered way and understand what that means. You can't have people that are working in these homes that are at the end of their rope and trying to figure out what to do and don't have good support and don't have a good knowledge base and understanding of the rights of the people in those homes, and that their own self. Look, we can't help others if we aren't in a good place ourselves. So we've got to do everything we can to support the people that are supporting people in the homes, for one thing. And we've got to do a better job of helping everyone understand what person-centered care really is, and that it is that choice and control that people have, and helping them, giving them good information and listening and respecting to what they tell us. So abuse, neglect, and exploitation, if there is not a good understanding of person-centered care, or if there is, let's reverse it. Let's do this positive. If we can train and educate people what person-centered care even means, they will be able to prevent and identify abuse, neglect, and exploitation. When we understand that we are going to treat people with dignity and respect and allow them choice, if we see other people we're working with not doing that, we are empowered to say, hey, that's not right. This is supposed to look like this. We are empowered to go to our supervisors and say, hey, I just saw or heard this happen. This shouldn't be happening. And that supervisor is like, oh, no, it shouldn't be. What's going on here? What we see too often is a resident is telling us. So we have a very small number out of 865 complaints that we were able to work with regard to like care complaints. There was only 131 that allowed us to go ahead and work abuse, neglect, and exploitation investigation. Now, I say that number is really low, but I'm going to tell you, in our visits with thousands and thousands of residents, our ombudsmen are carrying around some of the most horrendous stories that they did not let us address because they don't have a culture of person-centered care really prevalent, where the staff also are supported when that report gets made, that, okay, we're going to investigate, we're going to report that. We go in, and so they may let us, say someone does let us, and we go and we're talking to the facility and we say, we need to make sure that you reported that to KDADS. We need to make sure that you made a criminal report. Now, we don't necessarily just accept when they say they made the criminal report. We might check with law enforcement to see if that report was actually made. And I'm sorry, but we're finding in too many cases that they're used to saying, yes, we made it to the KDADS regulatory folks, and KDADS checks the box that yes, they made it. And we're looking and going, no, they didn't. There is no report. It goes farther than that. Each of these entities, be it APS, and thank you, be it KDADS, and thank you for all they do, because we would like to be able to just ask people and have them answer us and have it be the case. We would like that too. But what we know is maybe we need to look deeper. So part of our role is this, and we're going to start doing this more. This has come up more. Part of our role is when we have a case of abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and the person does allow us to investigate that, we are going to try and get their permission more comprehensively to share more information with APS, to share more information with KDADS, and then try and come back around and get answers from APS and from KDADS about what happened with that. We looked into it and there wasn't a criminal report. Was the facility cited for not doing that? Because then they're required to do that. Because then that person, if they know these things are getting addressed, then they can live there free from, which they have a right, by the way, not just to not have abuse, neglect, and exploitation, but to be free from a fear of. Now, if they know people will listen to them, respect them, take the actions they ask them to take, and that gets addressed, then they can live more free from fear of, okay? That's a specific right. It's a regulatory compliance issue within nursing homes, that people are, as a right, that they're free from fear of, not even free from the abuse and neglect, but free from fear of. So we've got to be, all of us, when they'll allow it, we've got to be showing them that we're listening, they're respecting what they say, and that their words hold the same value as the people who could be the alleged perpetrator. So if we have someone in the home that is saying, no, I didn't do it, and the staff and we have a person who's like, yes, they did, we need to look deeper. We can't just accept the person in the home that's working there saying, no, I didn't. And I'm telling you that this is something that is happening far too frequently, that people who are working in nursing homes are retaliated against by the ownerships, by corporate owners. They're afraid to report. We have specific cases right now we've been working that we are aware of, non-reports and delayed reports because they fear they're going to lose their jobs. We have laws on the book for that. We need to enforce them. We have regulations about that. We need to enforce them. And this all will start backing off the other direction. And Chrissy may not have quite as many reports, and KDADS might not have quite as many reports. So I'll stop there and let you ask questions, and you can see how differently ombudsmen operate than some of the other regulatory folks and what they do. And their purpose is every bit as important. So,
Camille, I can sure tell you've got a lot of energy and passion for your work. And I think we're all better off for it, and our families as well. So thank you.
Amen to that from Carter. What is, I guess, what is the next step towards enforcing it? Do you think that there is room for more accountability with owners or administrators in your mindset? Do you think that helps at all, or?
I hope we get more corporate, more ownership accountability. And the reason why is that we even have a hard time. We know we have to go in and create that discontent with administrators or DONs and hold them accountable for what they're supposed to do, just to make them uncomfortable that, hey, this was supposed to happen a different way. We do that with permission. KDADS, we want them to do that regulatory. We want everyone to be held accountable so that it happens. But we also recognize that, this workforce working in there, trying to care for the folks there and meet their needs the way they want them to be met. And there seems to be a little bit of a hesitance to hold people accountable because they know that they are receiving those orders from higher up. So we've got to have that higher up accountability and make it hurt there.
Not to mention the staffing shortages.
Absolutely. And we're very cognizant of that. And yes.
No, but I did want to take a moment, those of you guys in the group, the passing of the temporary nurses aide was a game changer for many of us in nursing homes, and we could not be more happy with the addition of that until 2023, and hope that it becomes more of a long-term recruiting fixture to help us get the trend the other direction in terms of staffing. So thank you.
Well, and I would say one last thing. If we can create an environment that is positive in nursing homes, people will be more likely to save their money to go there, to buy long-term insurance to go there, and to want to live there. So the fact that we don't have customers wanting to go there is really what, it is indicative of those owners, that ownership needs to change their model and their support for for the staff that are out there working and doing the job. Thank you.
Well, and this is Lee Chappie. I would like to just make a comment, because I think Camille is exactly right in what can prevent abuse, but what has happened over time, so the task force can understand that. What happened is we had atrocities happen in nursing homes, and they continue to happen, unfortunately, with some of the things that Camille was saying. And to prevent those, we take a sledgehammer to all nursing homes, and that's okay. because we do not want abuse or neglect to occur. But we have to be careful because Camille, we have to understand, like what Bill says, scalability. We need to understand all of these reports going to KDADs. KDADs needs to be able to have their energy spent on preventing these atrocities. It would be interesting for the task force to understand from an administrator's perspective just how much we have to report. And I'm not saying we don't want
Amen.
to report. We want to report. We want to prevent abuse. But the rules that have surrounded the sledgehammer have created this environment where we're so busy chasing care issues, and care issues are important, but we're so busy chasing care issues that we are missing the abuse issues, in my opinion. And so I think if we can help understand that, so that what Camille is saying, so that they can be heavy-handed on these folks that are, or companies or organizations or facilities that are committing, if something happens, they need to be held accountable. But things that are care issues, not abuse issues, it's going to create a very big challenge to that accountability. And the second thing I would just like to say, because I'm a big champion of person-centered care, is Camille is right. We use the language, it's been used here today, the language of most restrictive environment. We have to get that language out of our head when we're talking about a nursing home is an address. It is an address with 79 bedrooms or 85 bedrooms. It is a home. And everybody in our culture has to understand that and start using that language so that we can really promote that. And then the last thing I just want to say, just because I see it every single day, it's not just the culture piece. Families also need to understand. I have had daughters and sons that I have had to have long and hard meetings with where they say, you need to make my mother eat.
Can't do that.
Right?
All the time.
And it's hard because mom's making these choices and mom's in her right mind to make these choices, and we try everything we can. Anything that they will eat, we go get McDonald's, we go get Longhorns, whatever it will take. But at the end of the day, if mom's choosing that, that's a different conversation, and we have to have that. So that's a whole nother piece of culture that we need to start moving towards in our society, of that self-determination. And what's the difference between self-determination and use? And we need to really understand that. Thank you.
Well said. You know, something you said, Leanna, made me think, and also, you know, Carter's, positive reactions there to what you were saying, is that it's difficult for our society to sometimes measure and justify spending precious public dollars on prevention programs, training, education, all in that category of working upstream, so that, you know, Camille doesn't get that call, you know,
Yeah.
so that, you know, Chrissy doesn't have to respond to X amount, you know. So as we go forward, and I want to thank Hina again for reminding us to say one thing. I keep thinking of many things, though. You know, what can we do to work upstream? How can we, it's probably going to take money or policies, and, you know, even if you run a small nursing home, and just to bring everybody in for a half-hour in-service is expensive and difficult, but what can we do to work upstream? And if there are any data that would apply in the area of cost avoidance, so if we could say after a year or two or three of a pilot program on increased training, or could we demonstrate that X number of reports went down, or maybe X number of reports went up? Maybe that's the variable we want for a while, maybe that's, but can we demonstrate that we avoided cost somewhere with our programs that work upstream? But it is hard to justify how come we need more of this, that, when we can't show results necessarily.
Bill Carter here.
Sure.
I think you said it great. I definitely agreed. One of the points that I agreed with Lee on was scalability. As an administrator in Topeka, she's saying she's overwhelmed with reporting.
Yeah,
And so,
right.
I mean, that's an administrator with resources and staff who's overwhelmed with reporting. And at times that makes it very difficult to have person-centered care. As a big champion of PEAK myself, person-centered care, I think PEAK program should be more involved in holding members a little bit more accountable with the theology as opposed to just, yes and no questions at times, looking at their evidence a little bit differently. And that's something I've had conversations with my team members about. But I think that, the scalability and remembering, hey, as we pass these on, that there might have to be some reporting done by ownership groups if ownership are going to be involved in corporations and things like that.
Thank you, Carter. Jan, did you have something? You're on mute, Jan.
Thank you. Okay. I wanted to ask, in some of the nursing homes, especially out west and probably everywhere else, the shortage of nurses and aides relies on agency. And when a complaint from a resident refers to an agency personnel that is now gone on to another assignment, is there any trackability? Is it just because some experience would say that, oh, well, she's not here. She was only here a couple of days. Well, in the rotation, they may come back. But is there something that is done when to look at the movability of staff? If a staff person's going to be there for months, there's time to investigate. But when somebody's only there 3 days out of the month, but they'll be back next month, does it get swept under the rug?
And as an administrator in North Central Kansas, we do our background checks. We don't use agency at my home, so I can't speak to the agency as much. But we have what we call the scabs that jump from nursing home to nursing home after they've run a dry at the other ground, And we hear resources, but if you aren't having a word of mouth, it's really hard to find out allegations at times. And more often than not, the people who you hear bad things about in our areas turn out to be bad workers. And it's tough because I don't find many resources to find documentation on, at least. But I think that, the biggest point that I would build off of for you is we have to become less reliant on agencies, because if we truly want to talk about being cost effective and fiscally responsible with federal dollars, so many of our peers in nursing homes are paying these high dollar wages to agency staff members who should be working at half of their wage, the same as the rest of the staff. And it creates very bad and toxic cultures. And just being honest, there's, like Jan said, a lot less accountability with agencies. And that's part of why my home doesn't use agency. Myself and several of our leadership are trained to be our in-house agency. And so, I think that being able to share that model with others is important. I know that that's something that's kept us definitely financially afloat, especially during the pandemic, with hazard pay only increasing the rates that are being paid out. But I definitely agree, Jan, you're got good points. I hope I gave you a little bit of perspective from me, at least.
Thank you. And I might actually go. Sorry, go ahead, Lee. I was going to actually ask Linda Davies if she wants to go ahead and present to give you that perspective. And I think it's a nice segue into her presentation. And then we'll have a little more time, unless Lee, you wanted to add something in before I go to that.
No, I just wanted to speak about the agency piece to answer Jan's question. The facilities that the agency goes into are the ones that are held responsible for any abuse. There is a bill right now that was introduced, and unfortunately it has gotten caught up in wages instead of some of the other pieces of the bill. But it would be really nice to see the agency held accountable for reporting any abuse that occurs from the staff that they employ. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, Hina.
Thank you. So Linda, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself, and Emma will share your presentation.
Good morning. Can you all hear me okay? What's up?
Yes, we hear
Thank
you.
you for inviting me. Okay, thank you for inviting me to this discussion. By way of introduction, I am the practice specialist for the Kansas Board of Nursing. It's just a title.
Linda, I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble hearing you. I've got my mic turned up to about 75, and the other voices are pretty loud. Have a little trouble. Maybe it's just me.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit.
No.
And if everybody else can hear you just fine, it'll be my problem, and I'll just lean in.
Can you hear me now? Is that better?
Is a little bit better. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm wearing out this laptop's microphone capacity, so I will try to probably get a nice face shot of me. I'm so sorry, but if I can get close enough to it, maybe you can hear me better. Is that better? Okay. So thank you for inviting me to this discussion. I have actually learned a lot already just hearing your guys' discussion. I'm the practice specialist at the Board of Nursing, and it's just a title I constantly learn daily. I oversee the investigative division. So when we look to investigate a nurse accused or alleged to have violated the Nurse Practice Act, and so that's what we do. And I report to the executive administrator, Kara Moreland. I'm a bachelor prepared nurse, having worked in medical, surgical, labor and delivery, ICU, and primary care. And I even ran a health department for 5 years. So Bill is correct. The pendulum has not completely moved off of treatment to include prevention measures. I applaud you. I'm currently working on my Master's of Science in Nursing in the area of patient safety and quality, and we'll complete it at the end of this year. So I think some of the stuff that you've been discussing are things that I've been seeing at the Board of Nursing, and what we have access to and what we have authority to look at. Next slide, please. The mission of the Board of Nursing is defined to assure the citizens of Kansas safe and competent practice by nurses and mental health technicians. Those are the two areas that we have authority to oversee. I'm going to speak about the agency that looks at the staff. I won't speak about facilities because we don't oversee facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, agency nursing facilities. We don't have anything to do with any of those. But we do sometimes work between government agencies like the Office of the Attorney General, the Medicaid Fraud Division. Sometimes they will have a case and they will send it to us, and we'll do simultaneous case investigations. Also, there was a question about employment and how to track to know if a staff person is actually jumping from job to job. We don't currently have the means to track employment, and it's not in our statute or regulations that we would require the nurse to log that in our system. I really wish it were. Next slide, please.
I think you're right on that, Linda.
So if we can get statutes and regs changed, but that takes an act of Congress, but yeah, okay, all been there. So slide 3, the Board of Nursing has authority to license, educate, investigate, and discipline. And we currently have it's a little over 70,000 nurses that we license in the state of Kansas. And then there are nurses that come into the state of Kansas who have a multi-state license from another state, but maybe has not been licensed in Kansas. And those are a little bit trickier to understand because we don't often get reported that they're here in Kansas working unless there is a complaint filed for misconduct to the Board of Nursing. We would never know that they were here. So they could be an agency nurse asked to come into the state of Kansas to work at a facility of what you guys have indicated, have a violation of the Nurse Practice Act, and they can report to us, and we can look at them for having violated the Nurse Practice Act for the state of Kansas. And if they have a multi-state license, say from Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado, there are 39 states that are in the compact, then we will take our investigation and report it to their home state as well. So we can take action on their privilege to practice, as well as communicate back to their home state that there is a violation of our Nurse Practice Act, and they then might also look to see, does the abuse that happened in the state of Kansas, do they need to take action on their multi-state license? Usually if there's an encumbrance that's placed on a license by one party state is enough for the other state to take action on. But we have to be told that they're here. So the Board of Nursing, license, and we have 3 days, business days to, once the application is deemed complete, to turn that licensure around. But applicants are responsible for submitting transcripts, taking the NCLEX, and passing. Some of them think they take it and they can start working. We had a call from one who said she took a pharmacology course, so now can she pass meds? That was interesting. The pass rate for Kansas graduates meet or exceed national rates, which is about 86%. So that's minimum competence when they first get out of school. Fingerprints are required for background information, and it would be surprising to know how many believe that they don't have a background and it pops positive, and we have to ask them why they answered incorrectly on their application. And then we ask for certified dated court documents. We ask for an explanatory letter. The Board of Nursing, what I found is they really they want accountability from the applicants who are applying for licensure in the state of Kansas because of our mission to protect the citizens of Kansas. We don't protect the nurse, we protect the citizens of Kansas. That's our mission. Let's see, so on average, because every year about 36,000 licenses go through for renewal at the Board of Nursing, so because it's a biannual renewal cycle. And then all of this information is on the KSBN website under our annual report. The average number of applications, though, that are reviewed for legal, which is where they have a background that's indicative of a legal nature, or they've answered incorrectly, and maybe there's no background, but they didn't answer the question correctly. About 1,500 of those applications cross over to our division, and we have to look at those separate. For the education piece of the Board of Nursing, Kansas has seen a 19% drop in admissions for LPN degree over the last 5 years, but a 6.5% increase in RN undergraduate admissions, and also an increase in APRN degrees. There is 30 hours of CNE that is required for renewal of a license, and over the half of the states in the United States and in the compact require continuing education. And as medicine changes daily, and like with the person-centered care, I've heard of patient-centered medical homes, all of those things. CNE is beneficial for all nurses, I believe, to be able to maintain competence. Disciplinary action taken on a license occurs after the violation, after the investigation of a violation of the Nurse Practice Act. Next slide, please. And that's what I'll go into more, since that's my division. So statutes and regulations listed in the Nurse Practice Act define grounds for discipline and unprofessional conduct. And on this slide is a list of what is found in 651120 and 60-3-110. This list is not all inclusive, but it kind of gives an overview of the things that we look at. There are other statutes and regulations that may be cited as well, but the board can take action on violations cited in the Nurse Practice Act. And you'll see abuse, neglect, boundary issues, HIPAA violations, because we'll get social media posts. It's amazing what people will do. Next slide, please. So the process for case investigation at the Board of Nursing starts when a complaint is filed. We don't go out and poll every, see, I'm going to pick on someone, every Carter Olson and say, okay, Carter, every Carter Olson in the state of Kansas, we're gonna target you and find out that you, and believe that you have violated the Nurse Practice Act. We can't do that. We have to have a complaint made to the Board of Nursing. And this is where it gets to be a little tricky. Complaints come from a variety of sources, even anonymous, patients, family members, the public, employers, another healthcare professional, and somebody had indicated that some won't want to divulge information or report someone for fear of retaliation. Very true. The complainant, I think it was from Christy, who said that the identity is not released by the Board of Nursing, and that's per our statute of 651135. The complaint form is found online and is currently submitted via U.S. mail. We don't take over the phone complaints because we get a lot of calls. So we've got a complaint form that is completed online, or you can fill it out and then print it out and mail it in to us. In 2016, there was a proposal to make it where it was an online submission of complaints. In 2019, when I started, I asked for that to be brought back up to attention. So it's now under fiscal and logistical consideration. We've had to increase security. We've had to change our storage issues. There are a lot of, and then put it in the budget, basically, to be able to move towards this type of online submission of complaints, which I think will help facilitate the timely notification to the Board of Nursing of an issue. So all complaints that are submitted for professional review are reviewed within 2 weeks of when they are received in the agency. And this review includes two things. It's a two-pronged approach. So do we have jurisdiction? Is it a licensee of the Kansas State Board of Nursing? Are they a nurse or are they a licensed mental health technician? And then we look to see what is the allegation and is it a violation of the Nurse Practice Act? There is a priority assignment, one being an emergency where we need to move on it right away. Two is a significant investigation, which is where most of what you're talking about today fall within: drug diversion, impairment at work, abuse, financial exploitation, sexual issues. Practice-related investigations are priority threes, and theirs are usually where the facility has reported them because there was patient harm or could reasonably be harmed by the action, but the facility, instead of terminating the nurse, decided to do education for the nurse and re-educated them, got them back on, best practice. And we still look at that, though, and still have communication back to the nurse. And then there's a priority 4, which doesn't meet a threshold for us to open a case, but there is a quality check, an audit that is done by the Board of Nursing to review these as well during their quarterly board meetings, so that they can agree with us that it was not a case to be opened.
Do those get logged anywhere, Linda?
Yes, we have a log.
So you would keep a record on somebody if they had 5 or 6 of these gray area violations and then launch it larger? Okay.
Very much so, yes. And like I said, with the Nurse Licensure Compact too, if they have a multi-state license, even in Kansas, if we've given them one, if there's a significant investigation that comes in and I see their history that shows they've had 2 cases before where maybe the first one the board didn't find enough evidence to be able to take action on, but maybe on the second one there was, but they failed certain issues, and then there's a third one that's on the heels of the second one. I can go in and put an alert in the system for other state boards of nursing to know, so that if an agency were to check with the Board of Nursing as to whether or not this nurse, has any discipline against them or any pending investigations, they could potentially find that information out. But it's really used for state to state boards of nursing to have that information. I've asked if employers have access to that information, and I was told no at this time. I don't know if that's in the future plans, but that's through the National Council of State Boards of Nursing. So, and Adrian,
do you hope it becomes part of their future plans? Do you plan on advocating for that?
Adrian, our Director of Operations, is the NCSBN treasurer. And so we have kind of an in to kind of know kind of what's going on with NCSBN and what their priorities are. But I do communicate with Adrian daily as to what I need better access to. I need for us to be able to do case investigation more timely, things of that nature. So do I anticipate it? I don't know when, but if other states believe this would be helpful, I think that it could potentially be something on their burner. Yeah.
Linda, can I ask a question from chat? So this is regarding complaints, if they're written or mailed in. Is it reviewed within 2 weeks of receipt?
Yes.
And is there a timestamp when they're logged?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then, we ran into with COVID, when I started, everything in the investigative division was completely paper. I mean, not only just white paper, but pink paper, purple paper, blue paper, yellow paper, sticky notes, flags, everything, you name it. And I started in December or September of 2019, and in March of 2020, COVID was announced and the pandemic hit and everything got shut down and everything came back up. And we had to move completely from paper file folders to electronic to be able to handle the case investigation more efficiently. And like with every other institution and facility in the state of Kansas, we also had retirements from nurses that were investigators, and we had some who left because the state employment, our salary range does not compete, and they were able to get a higher rate of pay in the private sector, so they left. So I've had turnover in staff in the 2 years, and I think I've been constantly hiring and training. I'm a little tired because I want to be able to get to the nuts and bolts of these issues and figure out how do we help these nurses rehabilitate as well as then be better for these facilities to work. But yes, they are logged, and we do have all of that for the last 2 years. Before that, I would have to go back into paper and review all of that to pull numbers before that. But for the last 2 years, we have got all that electronically. No, it's not stuck in a pile of unopened mail. I have an assistant who, she's fantastic at being able to get those things logged, and then she lets us know when they are logged and in a folder for us to review so that we are reviewing them. There's 2 of us in a professional review, so one takes the first review and I take the second review, which is a more in-depth review. But at least it's looked at within the first 2 weeks that it comes in. So
Linda?
Yes.
Hi, Bill Persinger from Topeka. I would just, I no particular agenda in mind, and I haven't heard any complaints or issues, but describe, if you can, your connection to other state agencies in your daily work. Are there any gaps or anything we should be aware of that we could help with? Anything that's working well? I know sometimes it's, there are multiple, professionals or agencies that can be involved. And if that's an area you want to comment on, great. If not, no worries. Thank you.
I can tell you kind of what I see. I don't have data to prove it, but when I first started, we used to get like a little 2-3 sentence letter from KDAD that said, this nurse may have done X at this facility on this date, and nothing else. Well, we really need to not go on a fishing expedition. So if they already have an investigation open, that shared documents would be fantastic for us to be able to facilitate our investigation more efficiently and effectively. And likewise, if we see somebody in a long-term care facility, we should be able to, I think I've worked with DCF just recently on a few cases where I was like, who gets this one? I've got and I have a public health nurse over at KDHE, so I'm always constantly asking and talking with them. We will do simultaneous investigations with the Medicaid fraud division of the OAGs. But is it efficient? Not yet, I don't feel. I feel like there's huge room for improvement. Somebody mentioned a multi-task force or something that's over at the OAG's office. I would love to know about that.
Multidisciplinary task forces. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would, because I had always said there needs to be some sort of interagency roundtable where we discuss a case or, in confidence or whatever, but I don't know how that works or if it's possible, if we have authority to do that, all of those things have to be in place. But I would welcome that discussion for sure.
It's an area that maybe some folks on the screen work with every day, and but those of us who don't, if it's permitted, and I think it is under the open records and open meeting, if you have a paragraph or two or some narrative or verbiage to consider, I might invite you to send that to Hina. If you probably have her contact information, she can memorialize that and see if it emerges as an agenda item. And I'm just always, just sitting about thinking of the work of one particular agency. Chrissy talked about her work and the OMS, just how complex it is just to work in your own arena, your own area of operation, then to add those layers. If there's anything that you're thinking about that we could help with, get into training, regulation, statute, anything to promote that interagency connectivity, particularly in an age of the ease of connectivity, which of course we have to be careful with sometimes. If there's any words that will help us, I invite you to pass those to, and others on the screen as well, to pass those to staff. And
I know that we, in order to share documents between the OAG's office and us, we have like a memorandum of understanding of how we can do that. And that was drafted when I first started, because I was like asking, how do I share? Because I handle all the open records requests that come into our facility as well, because I was a paralegal before I became a nurse. So I get to handle all of those things. So I'm very consistent in what I do. But it's like, how do I share to another agency information that's considered confidential and protected with our agency? And I want to make sure we do it correctly and within legal guidelines. So I don't know if there's statutes and regs that need to be changed or improved upon, or maybe the mandatory reporting statute needs to be looked at as well. I only see it as being, and this is my very limited understanding, but to report children, disabled adults. But to me, shouldn't we all be mandatory reporters for even the nurse who's committing a violation of the Nurse Practice Act? I mean, to me, that's putting that adult or that disabled individual or that child in a situation where they don't know to probably report. So there needs maybe to be an expansion of that language, I guess. I don't know, and I don't know what that looks like, and I am not an attorney, and I do not purport to be one. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
Go ahead, Hina. I'm sorry, please.
I was just going to say, Bill, we're at 10:30 now, so I was going to have us continue this discussion, and I'll ask Linda if she can join you guys for your February 22nd meeting as well. But take a look at the discussion. Think about, we will send meeting minutes out for this. Look at that crosswalk that was sent from the task force as well of those recommendations. Look at your SWOT analysis again. So next time we will be using Google Jamboard again, so be prepared for that. And we'll be writing those recommendations again. And meanwhile, if there are any further questions you have for Ms. Davies, for Linda Davies, just to specify, please send them to me and I can make sure that we memorialize them and have them open on the website as well for any others to review. Any final?
I'm sorry, this is Ernie from ARP. Would that be questions for all our presenters today?
Yes, any questions you have for the presenters, you can send them my way, Ernest or Michelle, when you get an email from her, and we can send them to the group and make sure we report on them at the next meeting on February 22nd.
Such a great use of time this morning. Did a great job organizing that to all our staff and our participants and contributors. I'm always amazed at how quickly an hour and a half goes by, and my brain is just soaking this stuff up. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you all. And I've put my email into chat again as well. So if you have a question, send it along. All right. Thank you all this morning, and I will see you again February 22nd. Take care.